Hi, welcome back to day one of Shared Service and Outsourcing Week Europe Digital. Our next session is entitled From Startup to Scaling Up, Developing a Sustainable Enterprise-wide RPA Operating Model. And it's going to be led by one of our best speakers, Craig Ackerman, Global Head of RPA from Chasey Partners. So I've heard these guys speak a number of times, and it's always very valuable and very interesting. So I'm sure we're in for a treat. Just a little bit of background on Craig. So Craig brings over 25 years of experience in business leadership, transformation, shared service, and outsourcing to his role. He's an accomplished C-level partner with multiple success in rapidly assessing organizational leadership capabilities, team effectiveness, and key process to define or optimize corporate structure, enhance service quality, and achieve strategic savings. So before Chasey Partners, recently, Craig was SVP and Director of a multifunctional finance, HR, and procurement shared service team at the company Day and Zimmerman. If you don't know the company, it's a $2.7 billion industrial, defense, and workforce services organization. In a previous role with SAIC, which is a federal service provider, Craig was Deputy Director for Shared Service as well as a member of an enterprise PMO charged with removing $100 million in overhead costs through functional transformation, shared service establishment, and strategic cost reduction. The session is going to be about developing a sustainable enterprise-wide RPA operating model. And I want to remind you all to put your questions for Craig into the Q&A box to the left-hand side of your screen. If you type them in, then we will be able to ask Craig those questions at the end of the presentation. So make sure you exercise the benefits of a digital conference by asking your questions without having to stick your hand up in front of a bunch full of people. So yeah, as I said, the session focuses on how to develop a sustainable enterprise-wide RPA operating model, including structure, control, governance, and creating a long-term roadmap. This also discusses how you can create a robust, holistic approach to help you reap the considerable benefits of RPA, which I know is one of our most asked questions and one of the hottest topics of shared service today. I'm going to hand over to Craig, who's going to lead us in a polling question to kickstart his presentation. Over to you, Craig.
Sally, thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. Although when you said one of our best speakers, only slight pressure there for me to live up to that. Good morning, everyone. I enjoy speaking to you this morning. If I sound a little bit tired, it's only because I'm on the East Coast of the United States coming to you this morning. But it is 6:30 here, so I can't complain too much. But good morning. I hope it's a little bit later for you, and I look forward to hopefully making this a lively session for you. Let's start off with a poll. It's always helpful for me to understand where we are as an audience. So if you could read through these questions, I'm going to need you to click on at least one of them, actually only one of them because you only have one choice, and then hit the submit button in the lower right-hand corner. This is important information. Whether you've not started your RPA journey yet, in the due diligence phase, research or education, you're learning about RPA, testing, proof of concept or pilot, implemented and evaluating, implemented and scaling up, or if you're really advanced, you've implemented cognitive and intelligent automation or implemented artificial intelligence, implementing. Very important for me to know where the audience is at today so I can direct my comments appropriately. I'm going to trust that everybody's had a chance to vote, so I'm going to advance, and here's our answers. Okay, 20% of you have said you've not yet started. Perfect. I hope you'll get a lot out of this. 35% due diligence, also very helpful. Currently testing, 20%. Implementing, 20%. And scaling up, 10%. Interestingly, no one has yet said they're implementing cognitive or intelligent automation or implementing artificial intelligence. So you have come to the right session because I'm not going to be speaking extensively about that, although I will talk about that a little bit, especially for the folks that haven't started or in the due diligence and education phase. There's a lot of talk about intelligent automation, cognitive and artificial intelligence. So I'll touch on that briefly. But It sounds like we've got the right mix for this audience. I'm going to hit just what you're looking for today. Okay, good. Thank you. That was very helpful. If you were on earlier, you heard Phil Searle, who's the CEO of Chasey Partners, go through this slide, so I won't spend much time here, other than to say I'm part of a global consulting advisory services firm called Chasey Partners, and I'd like to point to that Chasey difference, bullet number 4, practitioners first. I worked in shared services, starting up and running shared services for the last 15 years. I've only moved over to the advisory side in the last year. But importantly, even before I went into shared services, I was an IT director and a director of application development. And so it gave me a good perspective when I got into shared services, because I understood the IT and the automation potential. And then, of course, getting into shared services, much of what we're asked to do is to utilize automation to improve processes within the shared services realm. So I've got a very nice balanced understanding from 15 years of starting up and running shared services and another 5 or 10 years of working in IT to bring to this role this morning. At Chasey, we like to say we're different from some other consultants in that we balance a core discipline around transformation, all that change that's related to starting up and planning for and scaling up shared services, with this idea of technology enablement, especially robotic process automation fits so very well with the things that we're asked to do. And we bring a perspective that maybe some other consultants don't do. If they're purely RPA, they may not understand your world, your shared services world, as well as we like to think that we do, especially from being former practitioners. Here's a quick list of companies we've worked with and currently engaged with. Coca-Cola in Turkey, in Europe, one of our larger clients. Won't spend too much time there. But from a scaling up RPA perspective, here's one current engagement that I can reference. Phillips Edison and Company is a $500 million company in the United States that runs real estate. And they asked us to come in and just help set up their initial RPA program. Within a week and a half of looking at and planning to build their first bot, they essentially asked us to help scale the program across all of accounting, to include billing, accounts receivable, collections, all the things that are listed here. And they've asked us to assist them with not just process assessments and process improvements, but actually building the robots, updating their policies for the hybrid workforce. We'll talk more about that. Putting together a robotics operations model and a business case. All of this hinges around knowledge transfer. An important piece when you hire an external firm to assist you in your robotics journey is, of course, that knowledge transfer, helping you ramp up your internal capability so that you can carry things forward. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. All right. So into the meat of things. Let me advance this a couple of times. Here's our agenda today. So I'm going to start by talking about the current state. Much as you've given me an indication of the current state of our audience, there's recent results out from SSON Analytics on current state of RPA in Europe specifically. We'll talk about what happens after that initial successful pilot or proof of concept. Where do you go from there? Built into our title is the concept, the idea of sustainable and robust RPA initiatives. It's one thing to have a successful pilot. It's another to scale this up and operate it in a sustainable fashion. Much of that success hinges on setting up that something you've probably all heard of by now, a COE, a Center of Excellence around RPA. So we'll talk a little bit about how to build one of those. Governance, of course, is always important in the shared service environment, equally important in an RPA program. So we'll talk about that, as well as collaboration with the business. And last but not least, managing talent and workforce redesign, because, of course, robotics is going to affect the makeup of your workforce. Okay. So first topic, current state. where are we at in 2018? I should note some of my slides contain a lot of information, and the good news is at the end of this week, everybody who's signed up for the conference is going to receive a digital gift bag, and included in that digital gift bag will be a link not only to the presentations that have been part of the conference this week, but also a chance to go back and listen to any presentations that you missed or re-listen to a particular session. So if you like what I say today and want to hear it again, or more importantly, pass it along to one of your colleagues, you'll be able to do so. This very first slide is from a research organization that many of you probably know, Horses for Sources, working together with KPMG, and they said, hey, what's the focus in 2018? It should be no surprise, top of the list, robotic process automation outpaces all of these other current topics like cloud, Internet of Things, analytics. There's artificial intelligence, machine learning, cognitive down the left-hand side. We're going to have a session a little bit later today on blockchain, understanding what that's about. Virtual reality, drones, and driverless vehicles. But RPA tops the list, 53% significant investment, 28% some investment. So it's currently a very strong topic. I like to say 2017 was the year of getting RPA into the business. 2018 is the year of making a meaningful investment, if it makes sense for your organization. I know some of you that are still researching are still trying to figure that out. This data is hot off the press, came out in July of 2018 from SSON Analytics, and specifically focused on European shared services centers. I give the source of all of my slides down at the bottom, so you can do further research if you wish. Main objective for GBS in the immediate future, near future, number one on the list, driving further efficiencies by leveraging smart technology. Outpaces everything else all the way down to driving enterprise-wide analytics, merely a 5%, 43% I think is a pretty strong number. And then where are we at in the European shared services operations? I think this closely mirrors some of our results. Is intelligent automation part of your operations? Not right now, 17%, we said 20%. Not yet, but planning. Our group said 35%, this says 34%. Yes, we're in the testing phase, 36%. I'd like to combine that with the two that we had. We said currently testing 20%, implemented the solution, evaluating result 15%. Add those together, you get to 35%. And then, yes, fully implemented 12%. We said implemented solutions scaling up 10%. So look at that. We're, our responses closely match the broader audience, unless you all are the folks that answered this survey as well. And then on the right side, I left this on there because I thought it was interesting. How about this thing called artificial intelligence? Who's doing that? Well, right now, 33% of the same audience said not yet. 45% said, well, we're planning. And only 20% said they were testing. But 20% is a pretty important number. So we'll, I did include some information about that in the slides coming up. And then here's another cut at it, a little bit tough to read, but I hope you can see that by maturity level and by scope of your operation may impact how much you've done so far. So upper left-hand corner, those who've been in business longer, of course, have done more with intelligent automation. The upper right, those who have a global remit have more of a charge. Lower right, if you've got full GBS implementation, maturity of your GBS. No, by the way, GBS, we heard in an earlier slide, of the 3,500 identified shared services operations around the world that SSON tracks, only 5% identify as global business services. So if you're in the other 95%, you're in good company. Lower left-hand corner by location, look at that. Europe tops the list in terms of testing IA or fully implemented, but even across the board in Western Europe, fully implemented RPA is only around 18%. So it's good to have references to where you are amongst your peer group. Okay, into what happens after that initial pilot. After that initial success, oh, it works for us. I like this chart. I found it. Again, it's a June 2018 chart, but it speaks from the lower left to the upper right. Some things you may wish to consider as you're looking to do more than just straightforward RPA. Don't get me wrong, straightforward RPA is an effort unto itself and could easily take the next 12 to 18 months to get your arm around all the ways you can use RPA within your company. But this idea of intelligent automation is mixing different types of automation together for the benefit of your shared services operation. So it starts with traditional IT automation. I like to call that the stuff that we depended on before RPA came along with RPA. And what I like about this chart too is it gives you some simple examples, some simple use cases underneath. Going up that first column on the left-hand side, if you add in vision, and vision is what many of us think of as OCR or optical character recognition, expanded. It's not just characters, but it's being able to recognize images, being able to I'll call it template agnostic. You don't need a specific template for your invoice. The vision piece is recognizing somewhere on that page there's a logo, being able to tap into, say, Google AI and identify that that logo is from that customer, and therefore it translates it into the text that's associated with it. No different than you would do if you were Googling somebody on a specific image. And then moving up to chatbots, what some more advanced operations are doing, they're integrating what a chatbot can do with RPA, and it's yielding some exciting opportunities. Moving to the right, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but you get into things like machine learning in that middle column, all the way over to virtual assistants on the right-hand side. With virtual assistants using natural language processing, we think of Siri or Alexa as the simple example. Of course, there's enterprise versions of this, but it doesn't have to be too different. That client that I referenced earlier, Phillips Edison, is using Alexa in their office space. Instead of using the traditional dashboard, they've connected their back-end database to a business version of Alexa, and they're in the process of using Alexa. You query Alexa and ask for a question that you might typically look up in a dashboard. You can ask Alexa, and oftentimes she's going to return the answer. Not without challenges. Takes some training to teach Alexa how to answer the questions properly. And then, of course, we all pronounce things slightly differently. But lots of exciting things going on with voice recognition and connecting that to data stores. One challenge, I should note, one challenge for me as a speaker is I can't see you nodding or waving or anything like that, so I hope I'm going at an appropriate pace. The other, I put this slide in as well because sometimes it's not clear. In SSON, we like to talk about intelligent automation. Many times we use that umbrella term to cover many different topics, whereas what we're finding in practice, as was in our answers today, a lot of focus on RPA, an emerging focus on the other elements of intelligent automation. So I thought this was a simple chart to kind of look at the differences between the two and certainly reference in the future. Oh gosh, I had a point there. What I like to call RPA as foundational. And in some cases, I like to consider it a foundational capability that we all need to help bring into our organizations if we've not done so already. I liken it to Excel. I may be older than some of the folks in the audience, but when spreadsheets in Excel, Lotus 1, 2, 3 Excel, early macros all became the rage, it we all had to bring that capability into our company or our operations, but today it's ubiquitous. Everybody knows how to use Excel. It's just table stakes. Not everybody can build a strong macro, but RPA is somewhat like those macros and then taking on some. It's a fundamental capability that over the next 12 to 18 months, I believe every organization needs to figure out how it fits, where it fits, and where it can be used in the organization, else risk being disrupted, to use that overly used term, by competitors. So if you'll stay with that concept that this is a fundamental capability that we need to master in our organization, from there, once we lay the foundation of RPA, I think the intelligent automation is going to layer well on top of it. But we need to figure out where we're going to use RPA first, and then as we build up our robust infrastructure, we'll be ready for what comes ahead. So speaking of what lies ahead, I like this slide as well. This one's courtesy of SSON. They gave us some nice simple definitions to go from the spectrum of starting with desktop automation through RPA, digitized RPA, through machine learning and to artificial intelligence. You can scan down this slide, but I'd probably start in the middle at digitized RPA. Once you understand how the bots are going to work for you, then you can add in, you can couple it together with things like speech recognition, like we mentioned earlier, and the idea of robots fulfilling requests without human intervention. I don't know how many of you have a call center operation, but certainly a hot area for RPA is the idea of a side bot, where either the RPA is helping to answer some of the questions directly, maybe connected to a chat bot, or helping the agent do some advanced research or pre-research before diving in and helping the person answering the question what they need to do. So cutting down query volumes, making the agents more effective, some of the areas where RPA has some exciting advances. Into machine learning, of course, analytics, decision engines, we'll touch on that in a moment, and then the use of AI. Where could this all lead? I'll give you a preview of coming attractions. So I promise you this is the last slide where I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence. But I thought it was interesting. I actually pulled this speaking at another conference this week in Costa Rica. And they said, you know, we've heard too much about RPA. We'd like to know more about intelligent automation. So help us with some good use cases on artificial intelligence was one of the asks. So I liked it so much I put it in here. A lot of information on this slide. I really only want to focus on the top 3 rows. The bottom 2 have less applicability in our shared services environment, but this one, again, pretty current. May of 2018 comes from Gartner, and Gartner put together a nice guide for if you're going to delve into AI. This reference at the bottom is a good one. And he looked at 24 different service providers that can help a company explore AI. And this chart synthesizes some of the nice use cases. So first one, decision augmentation. Think of that as, you know, we all have vast databases of information resident in our companies. How do we query that information and effectively? You know, all of us today are used to querying the database. How do we use AI to dig into the database and make us more efficient in our searches, I guess is the best way to look at it. So some of the examples of use cases, fraud detection, you know, as a company, especially credit card companies have large stores of information. You know, we all are used to, I assume used to by now, I know I'm used to, if you use your credit card in some place where you haven't typically used it before, or perhaps in a new country, you might get a message from your credit card company, or you might get a phone call inquiring about your out of pattern use. So there's a good example of that one. Let's see, predictive maintenance is another that comes to mind. Airline companies and others that take lots of data on, every time that airplane parks in the gate, they do a quick maintenance check. That all gets entered into a system. They're now using AI to predict when specific planes are going to need maintenance. So if you've got some sort of maintenance schedule in your company, that may be a place you could utilize AI. Anomaly detection, tumor detection in healthcare. We've probably all seen articles on where Watson and others are getting better than doctors now in terms of they can even read the X-rays and the scans and spot things by looking at comparing like images quicker. Process optimization, of course, near and dear to our hearts and shared services. In terms of looking at vast stores of information, relevant clauses in contracts was a good example on this one, helping us if you've got an area perhaps in your shared services operation that deals with a lot of contract lengthy clauses, et cetera. You might use AI to pull out common terms. And then processing images is one that fits into AP, accounts payable, and voice to text is that chatbot interface mix that we were talking about earlier. Last one, customer user engagement. That speaks to the call center virtual agents that folks are now utilizing and things like that. Okay, I'm going to move on from this slide because you came here to talk about RPA. Or learn about RPA. So how do we get to sustainable and robust RPA initiatives? I like this slide because oftentimes when you haven't started or in your due diligence phase, you need to think about what lies ahead. Again, thanks to SSON for this data. 40% of the time, the challenge with implementing RPA is standardization of processes before implementation. Sometimes early in the journey, we think that it's going to be employee fear of job loss, but the data shows us that that really is a much smaller number. And what you find is once you jump into RPA, employees, once they understand the potential, that it really removes that routine work and simplifies their jobs. Some of the folks that initially were fearful become the biggest advocates. And they're the ones that say, well, can you look at this process too? And how about this one over here? Because you really do make their jobs more interesting as you go. These two slides are extremely powerful. And I'm not going to spend, I could spend the rest of the time talking about them. But two slides from SSON when you're starting your IA journey, what you should know. This one came out in March, and they listed from lots of feedback from lots of folks throughout their journey, what are some of the challenges? So the colorful boxes at the top are the top 10 causes of failure, or I should say missteps early on with RPA, and then the short phrases underneath give you some suggestions on how to mitigate those steps. So especially if you're early in your journey, this is going to be helpful. Looking at the wrong processes. Oftentimes, it'll be tempting to want to take your most complex process and automate it. But just with standard automation, same thing goes for RPA. The more complex the process that you're trying to automate, the more challenging it's going to be to use RPA to do it. We pointed RPA at a heavily Excel-based process at a client I was working with, and it took us 3 months to build that specific bot. When we went to a simpler process, it took us 3 days. When you're early in your efforts, generally there's less patience for the 3-month process, although the reward may be richer. If you're going to go after a very complex process, you need to set expectations accordingly that it's going to take a while to master the bot for that. Insufficient skills, it's pretty simple to get going with a proof of concept, especially if you pick a simple, I'll call it record and replay type bot. But once you get into more complex, either error handling or analysis of inputs or things like that, you need a combination of technical skills, programming skills, with more in-depth understanding of the tool. So I guess what's saying here is that the person who's just learned how to program bots is not going to be able to handle the more complex interactions, and you got to be careful you don't go too far too fast. IT-led versus business-led project. We've probably all heard this caution early in RPA. RPA vendors often comment that this is something that can be driven by the business or can be driven by shared services. And whereas that's important, I like to say you need a strong partnership between shared services and IT, the business and IT. Can't be too far weighted one way or the other, but it absolutely needs to be a partnership from the beginning. Lack of business case and failure to plan ahead of time. There's a promise of speedy ROI from RPA, and in some cases that's true. But I heard I think it was a CFO at a major company, talk about how year one of RPA was pure investment and little ROI, especially as your folks are getting trained up and learning. Year two was about break even, and it was not until year three at a company that was pretty far down the line that they started to experience the real ROI that they were expecting. So you've got to have a good business case in order to sustain some of the bumps along the road that you're going to encounter, and refer back to that business case often and adjust it. Last but not least on this page, not considering what happens when processes are automated. It's exciting to think about automating a process. It's a little bit more challenging to figure out the integration between the human workforce and the virtual workforce, the bots and the people. So you've got to have a good plan for hybrid operations as your robots go live. Automating too much of a process or not optimizing for RPA. We always say you should optimize before you automate, but in some cases we go straight to automation knowing that there's an improvement down the line, and that's okay. But I didn't include statistics in here, but most folks are finding that on average about 70% of activity in an end-to-end process can be automated, whereas 30% still needs to have human touch. It depends on the process, of course, but if you go in knowing that it's rare that you'll be able to automate an end-to-end process, then you can plan for this ratio of the human may do some work ahead of time, the bot will do its work, and then it hands it back to the human to kind of finish the job. Some cases you want to do this for control purposes. You don't want to necessarily entrust your complete process to the robot, whereas the robot, an example I had recently was we were automating a process where in the final steps it created a batch and then it posted that batch. Well, we decided that we weren't going to have the robot post the batch because, at least for now, the human who's been doing the work needs to go in and essentially validate that the batches were created correctly. Until you've worked through, I'll call it 3 to 6 months worth of an automated process, you don't always know all the errors that are going to occur, or frankly things that you couldn't build into your process as you were planning to automate it. So it's good to have a thorough review before you entrust the bot to press that last button in the process, post the batch in this case. Training robotics is a series of automations as opposed to end-to-end transformation. As with any transformation, it's always best to think start to finish, end to end. And we're used to doing that in shared services. Robotics is just one piece of the puzzle. It's new, it's exciting, it's that shiny new object, so we can get over-focused on it. But this really fits in well with the continuous improvement journey that we're all charged with in shared services. So keep thinking end to end, and you'll be fine. Traditional delivery methodologies, and it speaks mostly to the IT side of the house. This isn't. You'll be able to do things much quicker. We don't have months of gathering requirements and months of programming and months of testing. It can be days or even hours. However, iterations are helpful, and you still need a strong test environment so that you're doing things in a development environment, then you move to test, then you move to production. So in that way, I encourage you to absolutely think traditionally in terms of how you develop, but from there, it's going to be iterative and quick. Overlooking IT infrastructure, there are basic setup rules that you're going to need IT to set up. And last but not least, RPA alone is not enough, and that's where that handoff between humans and people is important. But extending robots into digital self-service reaps greater returns is the last sentence in here. What you can do is build a bot to do certain tasks. I was listening to a CIO from GE in, gosh, I think it was November, and he mentioned that they build bots for things like the document search robot. So today when we need to go find a document, we're opening up a shared drive, we're putting in certain search terms, we're trying to find something. It could take us minutes, if not hours, to find that certain thing. Some companies are building bots to do those types of things. So digital self-service could be, you could have a document search bot, or you could have an information lookup bot that sits as a side bot to your contact center agent. So that's what we mean by digital self-service. Okay, hope some of that was helpful in terms of next steps after POC. So who's going to help drive all this? Well, of course, you need a strong COE. You've heard that. I like this particular model, compliments of Ernst & Young, that represents well all that goes into your COE. On the left-hand side, you've got important roles that are played by IT that have an input into that center box of your CO. On the right-hand side, you've got important business roles. But within that center box are some of the concepts that you need to build into your COE. So certainly if you're in the planning stages or you're just coming out of your pilot, hopefully you're thinking ahead to building a COE. Some companies are actually building their COE before they ever build their first bot. They recognize that they've got a long-term vision. They understand how important this is, and they said, I would say that the smart money is on investing in this infrastructure first. So I won't spend too much time here, but testing and learning environment is important for where you're going to be building the bots. Building a skilled and knowledgeable workforce. This extends out to the business so that the business understands what makes a good candidate process for RPA versus not. Repeatable methods and processes. Lots of times, once you start building out bots, you're going to have repeatable code, reusable code, like processes. You're interacting with your ERP system today. You've probably got batch processes that you can that humans repeat. Well, the bots can repeat those as well. Program and governance, we'll spend some time talking about that in a moment. Value realization is simply metrics, how we're going to measure the success of what we're doing. Important to feed back to your business case and sharing the successes with the organization. And then business sponsorship engagement, just like shared services. This works best when you've got sponsors who are well informed, understand the value, see the progress and advocate for continued investment. Spend a little time on how to set up a COE. Even though it's called a center of excellence, they're not always centralized. You may have already heard that there's 3 different models for a COE. It could be centralized, hybrid, or federated. Centralized model, of course, is one in the center of all your business units. Good advantages here in terms of a single place for all learning, but the challenge is your business units may not feel that it's as responsive to their needs, or frankly prioritizing amongst the asks from all the different business units. Lots of shared services organizations are finding as they start building and delivering bots and showing videos around the company of what it can do, the floodgates open up. You start with 2 or 3 simple finance or HR processes, but then once the business unit heads hear about it, then they say, well, how about this and how about this? And the list goes to 25, 50, 250 requests for the next bot. So how do you prioritize all that? Sometimes that can appear to be a challenge. So hybrid can be a nice answer where you still have a center of excellence in the middle that is handling the more complex projects, but where you've got smaller COEs closer to the business units that can take direction from the center, but can be more responsive to those needs of the business. You need to have, of course, know the disadvantages for sharing lessons learned and plan for a community of practice, if you will, but good mix for it. And then lastly, some companies are starting out federated, and it's either a planned approach or it's what they happen into, in that the businesses are impatient. They hear about, and rightfully so, they understand the value of this, and so you've got many COEs popping up in all of the businesses where everyone wants to build their own bots, highly responsive to their individual needs, but very challenging to manage from a best practices standpoint across the business, and make sure you're not reinventing the wheel or got redundant processes going on. I think in time, unless this is very well planned, this could be a nightmare scenario for IT or even shared services to control what's going on throughout the business. So my preference is definitely to hybrid or to centralize, but of course, your business will make the decision. I also see where you've got federated. Sometimes you'll have one business that starts out with, I'll call it UiPath, another business adopts Blue Prism, another business adopts a different tool altogether, and that can be challenging too for vendor maintenance. So what goes into a COE? I won't spend too much time here, but left-hand side, infrastructure engineer through developer, those are the technical people that are charged with designing and building bots. Right-hand side, business analysts who service support, those are the folks interacting with the business, mapping the process, coming up with the design documents that the solution architects and the developers build off of. RPA supervisors, kind of a hybrid role. That's once you start building bots and putting them into production, who's working with the business to make sure that things are working well and consistently and being updated and working through challenges. Service support is, hey, my bot had a hiccup. My bot didn't report to work. What's going on here? And then across the top is championing and sponsorship and change management, all important. Upper right-hand corner, change management, as you can imagine, is huge. I'm sure you're discovering that. So these are all roles that could fit into your COE. Should note that some COEs have, in the beginning, only have 2 people. So those COEs are going to have to wear multiple hats, but as they mature, could have 20 people, where say there's 5 developers and 2 solution architects and 1 infrastructure engineer, 5 business analysts out working with the business, et cetera. So certainly a scalable model, and just like anything else in the business, you need to spend some time thinking about specific responsibilities. So here's the sample position description of one of the positions on the prior page. All of this comes from a UiPath. You can Google it, enable RPA COE, and it's a good starting point if you've not yet planned out your COE. Okay. Cross-functional collaboration with the business. As I mentioned previously, it starts with the COE, but in terms of collaborating with the business, we've got that box on the right-hand side, and then, of course, the box across the bottom. So the business needs to weigh in with the vision. They need to understand how you're going to engage. And then across the bottom, there's areas that your COE will help with in terms of developing solutions for business problems, enabling stakeholders to understand first and then become kind of your advocates out in the business. Skills development could be as simple as distributed RPA business analyst skill sets out into the business. Project delivery enablement speaks to how will you put that bot into production and how will it operate, how will the hybrid workforce operate together? And then vendor relationship management, of course, is either with your outsourced partner that's helping you build bots or with the software vendors if you need to acquire additional licenses, all things that need to be facilitated across the business units, done well by a properly set up COE. Key role for the COE is to continue to educate those stakeholders, those in the business, the sponsors, the executives on the value of RPA. So I like the bubble chart on the left. Biggest benefit that keeps coming back consistently from surveys is your FTEs can focus on more value-added work. So it's going to free up the mundane. Less so, though always exciting, is reducing FTEs. Productivity increase, being able to work 24/7, another large bubble. And then words that keep coming up again and again as you speak to those further along in their RPA journey are listed on the right-hand side. So as you're thinking about your business case and your likely benefits, this slide is a good place to start as things to bake into your business case as well as your elevator pitch, your constant education out to the business as to what this is and what this isn't. Okay, let me flip through this quickly. There we go. Again, compliments of Ernst & Young. I like this particular slide because it speaks to all of the areas of governance that you need to consider in your COE. So first column, no surprise. The COE needs to figure out strategy and governance, or needs to own strategy and governance for the organization. So some key concepts there. They will help shepherd the business through the entire process lifecycle of identifying processes, prioritizing which bots to build, optimizing them, developing them, and of course the ongoing operations of your bots. Value measurement cannot be underestimated and also should not be under-resourced, just as with shared services. Alignment and change, we've spoken about all the different elements of change management. Of course, they're going to be the experts in technology, partnered with IT, down the fifth column. And then the last one, how does all of this integrate well together with the business? So as you're thinking about building out your COE, make sure that everybody understands all of these different responsibilities, that you can resource it appropriately and plan for the needed investment to build an effective COE that can help deliver that sustainable and robust enterprise-wide RPA program. All right, the last topic that I was asked to touch on was managing talent and what about this workforce redesign? Again, current data just came out in July from a survey of the European Shared Service Centers. how is work shifting within the European SSOs? Two biggest answers. Today, 75 to 25 transaction knowledge-based work. You've got a 45% response. 29% was roughly 50-50. But the middle column is pretty telling. Is it your strategy to shift from transactional to knowledge-based work? 60% said absolutely yes. And then when asked what's driving that shift, a full 2/3 said more use of intelligent automation or RPA. So given this ongoing shift in our shared services operations, how do you plan for that? What are you doing? So biggest talent challenges, same survey. What are the talent gaps in European shared services operations? No surprise, top 4 answers, all related to topics we've been discussing today. Number 1, technology and automation, understanding its potential, being innovative, understanding how to interact with and use data analytics. I heard somebody say very smartly, the more you get into RPA, the more you understand your processes and the more you understand your data. So it will help drive awareness of and need for good data analytics. And of course, process excellence goes hand in hand with process automation. So no surprise, top needs there. Where do you find talent that can help with this shift to a more digital approach? And this survey came from again SSON. Top bar is we're leveraging third-party resources. Far outstrips everything else. 43%. We're utilizing external resources. My next slide will touch on that some more. 22% said we're not really building that capability at the moment, but of those that are trying to do it internally, many are retraining their existing staff. Some are recruiting staff in the business. Oftentimes your SMEs, your technical SMEs, the folks that are more technically oriented in your shared service operation are strong candidates. And then sometimes we're recruiting new tech-savvy staff 10% of the time. Some comments I've heard and ring true, company to company, we look for attitude and aptitude. Somebody who's excited about this journey is a good candidate to join your COE. Caution, although you may hear from the RPA vendors that you don't need any technical knowledge, we find that if, at least for your RPA developers, solution architects, and engineers, you need a strong technical knowledge to both speed the impact primarily, but then even on your RPA business analyst, the right side of your COE, the more technically inclined you are, the more interested you are in how bots are built, how bots work, the better off you'll be. And broad sweeping statement, but digital natives and millennials well suited for these roles should be somewhat obvious. I think this might be my last slide. So I spoke on the previous slide about leveraging external resources. Question, the circle on the left-hand side is what are you doing to build your automation capabilities? So 36% are relying on a third party. 25% is a hybrid of an internal and an external sourcing model. And 20% of your peers are doing everything entirely in-house. And there's certainly considerations and pros and cons of each. I like this summary slide for considering the options of each. And this, again, is one of those nice takeaway slides that you can study later as you're looking at how you'll move forward. Okay. And I should close with at Chasey Partners, we too like to help with that journey. We're one of those outsourced partners that can help either begin or mature your RPA journey. So we break it down into these 6 simple steps. We'll help you with process suitability and assessment, proof of concept or pilot, building out that operating model, that's that COE we spoke to, doing an assessment of the different tools out there, who should I work with, what's going to work best in our environment, helping you build that business case and helping you construct an automation roadmap. We find that without an automation roadmap, you're going to be less efficient. So I included one example. This one happens to come from Deloitte, and it was focused on, I think it's regulatory technical firms, but you know what, the concepts fit with any RPA journey. And that starts with developing your expectations, assessing your processes, mapping your technology, whether it be RPA or some of those more advanced technologies we touched on earlier, creating your prototypes, and then scaling your solutions, and that's what we spoke about today. So I thought this was a nice map to include. Okay, I've left, look at that, a whole 3 minutes for your questions. And if anyone has questions, there's a box down at the bottom. It says Q&A. Sally, let me turn it back to you. I think I should be turning it.
Yeah, great.
Now.
Thank you so much, Craig. That was so much information in the presentation. Thank you so much. I'm sure that you've given the audience an enormous amount of food for thought. And, you know, there was a lot of information in those slides, guys, so you can download them afterwards from the digital gift bag that you will get post-event, along with the GPS report and other resources from the company. But yeah, you know, look out for that. And if you want to go back and look at any of the information Craig spoke about, then it will be available. Now we have some questions coming in, Craig. First one from Sabina. She asks, for automation/technology, what kind of trainings do you suggest?
Okay, there's certainly lots of different training you can undertake, but one that I like to point people to is UiPath has put a significant amount of training. They just released probably 3 weeks ago what they're calling the 360-degree Academy. So I encourage you to Google, if you've not already seen it, Google UiPath Academy. And the very first training that I recommend people take, depending on where they are, is there's an RPA awareness class. It literally takes 1 hour to take. That's one that you probably, may be more advanced for the average person on this call, but it's perfect for people out in the business. So I suggest you take that RPA awareness class, as well as, or recommend others take it, as well as they have a follow-on class for the RPA business analyst. It's perfect for folks in shared services, because potentially anybody in shared services could be an RPA business analyst. So those are the two that I recommend to start with. UiPath also has put developer training, basic and advanced developer training. They have solution engineer training. They have RPA implementation training, all available online. That's a good starting point. If you engage with a particular vendor, say Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, they also have very extensive training programs, templates, anything that you could possibly need. So make sure when you're considering vendors, either look at what's available online or what the vendor themselves offer as part of the package of investing in that tool.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, we haven't actually got any time for further questions on this part of the event. But what I could ask you to do, please, is if you do have questions for Craig, and I see on the Q&A that a lot of you've got great feedback on the presentation, you can write them to him on LinkedIn or his email, which is under the biography that you see on the right-hand side of your page, or you can just continue to write your questions in the Q&A box and we'll forward them on to him. That's all we've got time for in this session, but we'll take a break and we will be back at 1:30 p.m. British time for a really important panel discussion focusing on innovation and what's in your value-added service catalog. And some of the panelists that we have here, Shared Service in Europe Advisory Board members Alexander von Thielmann from Siemens Shared Services and Mike Stopps from MSG Pilkington, as well as Suzanne Ryder, VP for Global Capability, Pearson and A.J. Vijasenga, the Chief Global Business Service Officer for J et al. So an expert-packed panel on and these companies will be sharing with you their value-added service catalog and what they've got in there, so you can benchmark your next activity and process to include in your shared service center. Okay, I will see you back at 1:30. Thank you. Bye.